Recently, the YouTuber Unique Geese recreated Garten of Banban in only 1 week. Sounds impressive, right? It's actually more impressive than you think. Before creating this, Unique Geese had no game development experience. When he gave himself that week-long deadline, it wasn't a week to create the game, it was also a week to teach himself how to create a game, in general. He even detailed the entire process in a video which will be linked here. Today I want to play through his creation, Garten of Banban Reincarnated, and directly compare it to the original. Geese's first game compared to the Euphoric Brothers' 9th on equal playing fields. First and foremost, the difference between the visuals are night and day. The lighting, textures, and artwork are all great. The murals on the wall feel exactly like what you would find at a school, where you can see each stroke and tell that it's rough around the edges. Both games use an assortment of licensed models, but they feel far more contextually correct in Reincarnated. The environments actually match the models. Speaking of the environments, let's take a closer look. One of the biggest issues I've had with the original Banban's environments is the lack of proper architectural depth. I don't mean that as in I want absurdly detailed and revolutionary locations, I literally mean depth. I want the place to make sense at a glance, not just be a lot of rectangles. The best example of this is in the windows in the opening hallway with Opila Bird. In the original, the windows are just these large blocks of a slightly dark translucent material. This failed at communicating what it was trying to be, with a ton of YouTubers just walking straight into them trying to move forwards. In Reincarnated, I can actually tell that these are windows because they added depth. Another environmental plus is that I don't feel like I'm in an empty void here. Adding the glass door at the start with an environment outside gives the location depth, like I'm in a real place. The location is far darker, which gives you less visual information, making the player more uneasy. The original Banban is well lit with a ton of fluorescent lights, which really took a lot away from the atmosphere. The Opila Bird reveal is a lot more effective when the creature is mostly shrouded in darkness, although this is definitely in part due to the new models and designs for the enemies. Old Opila is a 3D model nightmare, and it isn't a scary design. This new design is a lot scarier, although the character animations in the original Banban are actually smoother. They feel more organic, while these ones feel a lot more robotic. You don't have a drone in Reincarnated, which I personally prefer. The drone halted the gameplay in the original due to how slowly it moved, plus summoning the drone with a right-click created a multiple second delay between commanding it again. This is all for the sake of making pressing buttons more interesting, which wasn't worth it. There are notes scattered around in both, with Reincarnated being more well-designed and written. Unfortunately, Reincarnated's method of closing the notes is pretty dang bad. You can't just press escape or E again, you have to move your mouse to close and then click back into the game afterwards. I'm unsure if this is just a problem that I personally had, but I never found a way around it. Reincarnated also had an interesting softlock with the notes, which I'll get around to talking about later. The egg hunt is quite similar on the surface, with some needed improvements in Reincarnated. The original is a fairly uninteresting search in a single room, but Reincarnated adds place tubes and a backing track, although the backing track loops horribly. I liked the addition of a rule set with a crossed out final rule telling you not to take the eggs. All of these small details make Reincarnated's location feel a lot more like an actual kindergarten. In Reincarnated, you get to explore some of the place tubes to look for your remaining 2 eggs. The music fades out as you go further in, which adds to the creepy atmosphere. I do think that the crawling is a bit too slow, but it's not the end of the world. Further in, we see Opila's eyes glowing at the end of one of the tubes. I think the pinpricks of white work far better than the Banban 2 alternative. These tubes are a good example of the main visual issue in this remake: clipping. From holes in the walls to glitches where the tube colors change, it's glitchy and fairly distracting. Also, your flashlight's reflection can sometimes bend back into your face and blind you. The final quality of life improvement for the egg hunt lies within the deposit box. You can physically see how many of the eggs you've found and returned, instead of trying to remember after Opila swallows them. Plus, you don't have to sit through a slow animation every time in this one. They go right into the basket and you can get your reward immediately. This time, instead of getting a hammer to break down boards for the ball pit, you get a screwdriver to enter the vents and immediately fall through them. The transition into the cutscene is pretty darn jarring. This next scene harkens back to the Roblox obby from Banban 2, with the same parkour issue where you cannot maneuver yourself while in midair. Here's where we encounter the softlock that I mentioned earlier. I picked up this note, but when I tried to exit out of it, it never went away, even after pausing the game. I was fully stuck with this paper glued to my screen until I threw myself into the bottomless ball pit, which, by the way, still does not make sense, but at least this time they added a note showing the workers being canonically confused about it. Finally, we enter the vent at the end of the hall again and begin the chase sequence. This is far better than the original Banban chase sequences for a few reasons. The original all have the same exact terrible chase music loop, which gets so old and so boring. Oftentimes, that chase music was the only indication that a chase was even occurring. Reincarnated implemented an actually good sounding track that still feels intense to fit the energy of the chase. Being in a maze as Apila breaks through the wall creates a lot more stress than the original, and you actually visually can tell that a chase has begun. Plus, if you take a wrong turn, you actually have the opportunity to correct and still survive, unlike in Banban 2.
Why? It doesn't give you enough time to turn around!
Having only a toggle crouch made me panic when I couldn't immediately start running after Opila appeared, so it would have been nice if sprint cancelled out the crouch. At the end of the maze, the ground breaks from beneath you and you awkwardly cut to another cutscene where you somehow survive this massive fall and are attacked by Jumbo Josh. It's really hard to see what's going on here, especially with the fragments of floor bouncing all over the place. I think the original ending's animation was more coherent, but this one was more scary. I think it could have been even more scary if they showed more and kept the camera on the enemy, maybe made him move a little bit less so you could actually see his design, because they made an interesting design for him, you just can barely see it. So which is better? Reincarnated wins by a landslide in my eyes. It's more visually appealing, it controls better, and it has better game design. It definitely has its flaws, and I can absolutely tell that it was an early attempt at a game, but I wouldn't have guessed that this was a complete beginner's first attempt after only 1 week. Unique Geese's potential is through the roof, and it sounds like he's going to continue working on this project. I doubt he'll see this, but if you do, Unique Geese, you did an incredible job, especially for a first attempt, and I am highly looking forward to see what you do in the future.